I never expected my peaceful hobby, gardening, to spark a full-blown war with the HOA. But that's exactly what happened. And the woman who lit the fuse? None other than the self-appointed queen of the cul-de-sac, a woman everyone knows as Karen. Let me back up a little. My name's Daniel. I moved into this neighborhood in the suburbs of North Carolina 2 years ago. After saving for nearly a decade, I finally bought my dream home. A cozy 3-bedroom with a spacious front yard and a decent backyard. I didn't care much about HOA rules at the time, to be honest. The place was nice, and I figured as long as I wasn't throwing wild parties, I'd be fine. Boy, was I wrong. You see, one of the reasons I fell in love with this property was the garden space. I've always loved growing my own vegetables. It's peaceful, rewarding, and it reminds me of my grandfather. So, a few months after moving in, I started turning my front lawn into a modest vegetable patch. Tomatoes, peppers, carrots, you name it. At first, it was just a few neat rows behind a little white picket fence. But as the spring rolled into summer, the plants thrived, and I expanded. Added some raised beds, a small trellis for beans, even a couple of decorative planters with marigolds to help with pests. Then came her. Karen lived 2 houses down. Blonde bob haircut, big sunglasses, and a clipboard practically glued to her hand. She wasn't technically the HOA president, but everyone knew she ran the show. The first time she approached me, I was watering my tomatoes. "Excuse me," she said, with the kind of voice that dripped fake sweetness like syrup on a spoiled pancake. "I couldn't help but notice your farm." I smiled politely. "Just growing some food. Helps with the grocery bills." She raised her eyebrows. "This is a neighborhood, not a farmer's market." I thought she was joking. She wasn't. The next day, I got a note taped to my door. It was a violation notice from the HOA citing unauthorized landscaping, non-compliant structures, and disruptive aesthetics. I was stunned. I checked the HOA bylaws. Nowhere did it specifically forbid vegetable gardens. In fact, it only said lawns must be well-maintained and aesthetically appropriate. I figured that was the end of it. I sent an email respectfully disagreeing and even offered to put up a decorative hedge to better blend the garden with the surroundings. But Karen wasn't done. A week later, I was harvesting carrots when I saw flashing lights. A police car rolled up. At first, I thought something serious had happened in the neighborhood. Nope. The officer got out and said, "Sir, we received a report of potential illegal activity on the property. Someone called about unlicensed commercial farming." I laughed. I thought it was a joke. It wasn't. Karen had actually called the police on me over a few tomato plants. The officer looked embarrassed. He did a quick walkthrough and immediately realized nothing illegal was happening. "Sorry, man," he said. "We get calls like this more than you'd think. I'll just file this as a non-issue." But Karen was watching from her porch, arms crossed, triumphant. And that's when I realized something. This wasn't about the garden. It was about control. Karen needed to feel powerful, and when someone like her doesn't get her way, she escalates. So I decided to push back. First, I attended the next HOA meeting. I brought pictures of the garden, copies of the bylaws, and a petition signed by 8 neighbors who loved the fresh produce I sometimes shared. Karen tried to interrupt me, saying the garden made the neighborhood look unkempt. I calmly asked, "Is an organized, weed-free garden with edible plants more offensive than overgrown crabgrass or patchy lawns?" Silence. I continued. "The HOA's job is to maintain property values, not micromanage what kind of plants I grow. My garden is maintained, organized, and not hurting anyone." I could tell some of the board members were reconsidering. But Karen? She doubled down. A few days later, I received a certified letter threatening fines of $100 a day if I didn't restore the lawn to its original state. I consulted a lawyer. We drafted a formal response citing a North Carolina law that protected homeowners' rights to grow food on private property, especially when it didn't violate any written HOA agreement. I sent that letter to the board. Karen? She responded by sneaking into my yard and pulling up my bean trellis. That was it. I installed security cameras. The next time she stepped onto my property, I had footage. Clear as day. I filed a police report for trespassing and property damage. The officers were familiar with her by now. One even sighed when I showed the footage. Let me guess. Karen from Cypress Lane? Yep. They issued her a warning. One more complaint, and she'd be fined or charged. But Karen wasn't done. Not even close. She started a smear campaign in the HOA Facebook group. Claimed I was attracting vermin with my compost. Said I was bringing down home values. Posted unflattering zoomed-in photos of my garden beds. But this time, the community wasn't buying it. Turns out, people liked my garden. One neighbor even posted, "Karen, maybe if you spent less time policing tomatoes and more time minding your own business, we'd have a better neighborhood." Others followed. The tide was turning. And then, the best thing happened. A local news station picked up the story. Suburban Garden Sparks HOA controversy. They interviewed me and a few neighbors. The footage aired that weekend. I talked about food security, community, and Karen's obsessive behavior, without ever naming her directly. Karen was furious. She called it defamation. She even tried to sue me. The court threw it out. She had no case, and worse, for her, the judge mentioned that the footage of her trespassing would be admissible in any civil court if I wanted to pursue damages. I didn't. I just wanted to be left alone. And finally, she backed off. Months passed. My garden flourished. The HOA quietly dropped the fines. The board even rewrote the landscaping guidelines to be more inclusive of vegetable gardens, so long as they well-maintained. And Karen? She still glares at me from across the street, but she doesn't say a word. Her clipboard has been noticeably absent lately. What did I learn? That some people crave control more than reason, but if you stand your ground, respectfully, firmly, and with a little help from the law, you can win. Even against a Karen with a grudge. And now, I'm planning to expand. Maybe add some blueberries next season. Or start a neighborhood gardening club. After all, good food brings people together. Except Karen. She can grow her own bitterness from across the street.